Hello everybody and welcome to the very first episode of Inside Team Jackson's. I'm your host Danny Wynn, and we're actually filming here inside the Jackson's Mixed Martial Arts Training Facility located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now Jackson's, of course, is home to such elite fighters as Keith Jardine, Rashad Evans, George St. Pierre, Joey Villasenor, Nate Marquardt, David Loazo, and a whole host of up-and-coming and veteran fighters, all led by Coach Greg Jackson. Today we'll be sitting down with UFC and new WEC fighter Leonard Bad Boy Garcia. You might remember Leonard from his 3-round war with Roger Huerta at UFC 69. We'll find out what he's been up to and why he made the move to the WEC. We'll have him answer questions from fans, and we'll find out just what it's like to train with one of the most successful MMA teams in the world. So stick around, folks. Inside Team Jackson starts right now. All right, Leonard Bad Boy Garcia, hey, thanks for being the first one on the show.
Yeah, no problem.
How you doing?
Good, real good.
Now, you've got some big news coming up. Actually, it's all over the internet right now, but for those who haven't seen it, what is the big news and who are you fighting?
I'm dropping to 145 to fight for the WEC, and it's just I got a huge fight coming up. To one of the top 10 guys at 145. His name's Hiroyuki Takaya. Good stand-up kickboxer, good takedown defense, stuff like that.
Now, that show is actually going to be here in Albuquerque, so I'm super stoked for that because I've never seen you fight live. I'm a big fan, obviously, coming out of Jackson's camp. Are you excited about that?
Yeah, definitely, man. I get to show, everybody that I train with what it's like, when I'm going 100 miles per hour instead of 80%, 70%. So
how have you been received here in Albuquerque? Obviously, they probably treat you like a hometown guy, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely, man. And, I'm a Hispanic guy, I speak fluent Spanish, so, they took to me real well. A lot of the guys here at the team, right away, open arms after my fight with Roger. They were like, you showed us what you got, and that's what we wanted.
Now, most people don't know this, but you kind of have a unique story on how you actually got into the UFC. That, no one knows this story, and I think it's really cool. It probably looks like a blessing in disguise now at this point, so yeah. Tell the story.
Definitely. I was picked to be on The Ultimate Fighter, the reality show, the season 5, and went to all the tryouts, did everything, made the final cut, and went into the medical part of it. And they put me in the MRI tube, and when I came out of the MRI tube, the production team came up to my room, and they were like, we're going to need a drug test. And I was like, a drug test? They're like, yeah. So it's like, for what? And they're like, well, are you refusing? I was like, no, I'll give y'all one. And they're like, okay. So I gave them a drug test. They came back, results came back clean. And they're like, well, are you not taking cortisone or anything? And I was like, no, nothing. He said, well, you have a fracture in your wrist, wow. And it's one of those fractures that could go all the way.
Hairline?
Yeah, like hairline fracture, but it was pretty big, so it could have went all the way down my arm if they would have allowed me to compete and fight. So kind of, knocked me out of contention to being on the show just because they were afraid, first right hand I landed on somebody, my wrist would be over with, and that would be the end of it. So sent me home, and I kind of thought that was it. I didn't know what was going on. And the week after I took my cast off, Joe Silva called my manager, and he was like, hey, we really wanted Leonard on the show. He didn't make it, but, we got to fight for him anyways. And that's when they presented me with the Roger fight, and I was like, let's do it.
So a blessing in disguise.
Definitely.
Now, how did you actually end up here at Jackson's? You weren't training here at that time. No. How'd that all come about?
When I was on the Ultimate Fighter show for the tryouts, my manager got in contact with Greg somehow, and they started talking, and Greg was like, well, I'm looking for 55ers, and I remember watching a guy up there in Colorado fight. It was like, I believe he's from Texas, so he's kind of close to me, and his name's Leonard. And the coach was like, oh, yeah, I'll run it past him. And he called me, and he was like, hey, Greg's interested in you coming up. So as soon as I found out I was fighting Roger, I called Greg. And, it was a Tuesday when I called Greg, and he was like, well, I'll see you tomorrow. So Wednesday morning, I started driving up here and got here.
Yeah, I think I was here the day you got here. Yeah, fresh face, never knew who you were. And then So you go on, you fight Roger Huerta. That's the first time coach had coached you in his corner, right?
Definitely.
And how was that?
great, man. You know, he was a little shocked. You know, he was like, well, you know, you did exactly what I thought you were gonna do. You know, now I know what I have to polish you up on, what I have to work with, and you know, he's seen big things, and it's a good thing we got together. And I think it was a perfect match, and you know, the school, the team, Greg, you know, everybody. So it worked out perfect.
And you actually, you know, not to take anything away from Roger, but you kind of won the crowd over. I mean, there was just as many, if not more, cheers for you at the end of the fight because of your heart and your stick-to-itiveness. You know, and I've told you that myself, that, man, it was like probably the best fight I saw that year. I think you made fight of the night that night, didn't you?
Yeah, definitely. We got fight of the night. And I mean, one thing Roger told me, and you know, after we fought, he was like, I've never, ever been able to hit somebody as many times as I hit you, as hard as I could hit, you know, with the kind of cardio that I had that just kept coming the way you did. And he was like, you know, for me to say that to somebody, you know, you can take it how you want, but you know, I definitely have a lot of respect for you, and you have a lot of heart, which is something that, you know, I kind of grew up knowing. You know, I really don't know how to say die. I mean, the best way to try to get me out of there is to knock me out or put me unconscious somehow.
Now, obviously, you two, a couple of months later, ended up on the Sports Illustrated magazine. Obviously, it's more, you know, for Roger Huerta, but,
yeah.
You know, you're on there too. Did your family go nuts? What happened?
Well, you know, everybody was excited. I mean, you know, it's still the cover of Sports Illustrated, even though it's kind of my back and the side of my head. Either way, man, you know, he won the fight that night, and we both fought hard, and, I mean, he got the cover shot. That's fine with me. I'm not fighting for the Sports Illustrated cover, you know.
But it's still cool.
Yeah, but it was good to be on there.
Now, what was your first combat sport? Did you wrestle in high school? Were you just a brawler? Did you get in a lot of fights?
Yeah,
or did you always want to box? Before MMA, how did you start?
Well, you know, I grew up on a farm, so it's just like, you know, we were rowdy kids to begin with. And, you know, I had older brothers, and throughout the years of fighting with your older brothers, I actually hit one of my brothers when I was like 11, 12 years old and knocked one of his front teeth, you know, loose. So, my dad was like, dang, at 12 years old, you know, you got enough power to knock somebody's teeth right out. And he was like, let's get you in a little bit of boxing. So I boxed for a couple of years. And the funny story to that is, you know, I was raised by my grandparents, but my father, my biological father, was a professional boxer. So, you know, my dad picked up on, you know, he seen that I had power, my grandpa, and he was like, well, you know, let's give boxing a try. So I boxed a couple of years. And then after that, just kind of picked up jiu-jitsu somewhere along the way, and just kept training jiu-jitsu, and that's all I ever trained until I got here.
Really? So, do you remember your first win in MMA?
Yeah, definitely.
How did you win? And where was it?
It was in Plainview, Texas, my hometown, and what happened was there was some fights, and I was 17 years old, and we went to go watch the fights, and I was sitting out there in the audience, and the promoter had gotten wind that, you know, I could fight a little bit. So he walks up to me and my dad, and he's just like, hey, one of our fighters backed out. How much does your son weigh? And my dad was like, you know, he's about 140, 145 maybe. And he said, would you let him fight? And he was like, well, who's he fighting? He said, well, he's this kid, and he knows he knows jiu-jitsu. And we're kind of like, well, you know, we had seen 2 fights already, and both guys had been tapped out. And my dad was kind of like, man, you know, that wrestling's good stuff. And we found out it was called jiu-jitsu.